What is good, y'all? It is your boy, Jonathan Dumont, and this is Highly Visible and a Little Misunderstood, the show where we talk to the people we see every day because we don't know what we miss until we miss them. And y'all, we are still digging through our vaults, just like those vinyl record folks that be going on the weekends trying to catch their favorite records. We are dropping our favorite records. I really tried with that metaphor. That's bad. But anyways, no, we're still dropping gems, pulling some dope episodes from the vault, some of my favorites, and this one that's coming up for you is no different. Next month we are going to be dropping brand new episodes on our new theme on joy. I promise you, we will have those next month. I promise, sometime next month. But this episode, I am joined by Dr. Wilfredo Alvarez. Dr. Alvarez is an associate professor of communication studies at Metropolitan State University of Denver and author of Everyday Dirty Work, Invisibility, Communication, and Immigrant Labor. I'm bringing this episode up not just because it's one of my favorites. It's deeply insightful, powerful. Dr. Alvarez, he wasn't feeling well during this recording. He was spitting. My man's was spitting fire. But I think what we are witnessing in regards to immigration, particularly in the last 10 years, I would say, since Orange Man came onto the scene, even after he took office, he's keeping all of those promises he said what he was going to do about immigration. He's literally picking people up off of the street and sending them to countries that are not their home countries without due process, which is unconstitutional. I think in the discourse that's happening with everyday folks, we are losing an aspect of this that I think is really crucial, and that is really viewing other people as people, like the humanity of other folks. And in this conversation, I love how Dr. Alvarez breaks it down in a way of a hello actually is a very big deal. The non-reciprocated hello is a very big deal in the grand scheme of things around the humanity, around seeing people. That's a very big deal. And I caught myself gaslighting myself in this conversation. And so I thought this would be a wonderful conversation to dive into and bring back to light, just given what's going on with the unconstitutional deportation of immigrants. So this conversation was very rich. I thought it was very timely, but it also was one of my favorites. So bringing that back. And if you haven't already, check out our latest episode with Warwick Runnels. It was dope, and an incredible amount of shade was casted by Chick-fil-A. Personally, I think it's all right. Warwick had other ideas about that, but I'm going to leave that to y'all. You got to check out that episode. And as always, like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. It helps more folks find these conversations and join in. Speaking of joining in, before we jump in to our conversation with Dr. Alvarez, I got an invitation for you. We are collecting stories of joy for our upcoming season. Y'all know that we're going to be talking all about joy, and I would love to feature your voice, whether that be literally or otherwise. That could look like a voice memo about a joyful moment or memory, 30 seconds or less, please. But, do you? It could be a poem, it could be a quote, or even a journal reflection, a photo, drawing, or something that really you capture, or a sound that you capture that really explains or expresses joy for you. You'll find the link to share your joy in the description below. Tell us what's bringing you joy in this season in whatever way feels most true to you. I just wanted to do this as a practice or an exercise and an invitation for you all. I think that is all I have for you, but here is my conversation with Dr. Wilfredo Alvarez. Dr. Alvarez, how are you doing today? How are things going for you?
Hi, Jonathan. A great pleasure to be on your show. Thank you so much for your podcast and for leading these conversations, which I believe are critical today for everyone listening and for everyone in this country. So thank you so much for having me on your show to have this conversation.
No, I absolutely appreciate it. And so excited to talk to you about your book today. I've read a good portion of it so far. Very intriguing, very insightful. And it reminded me of my own time at in college and just my interactions with some of the custodial staff and support staff at my institution. And it just was very interesting that I was having flashbacks
Mhm.
to my interactions. And I'm sure we'll get into that and dive into that a little bit. But I read a little bit of your bio, but I would love, just to give you the opportunity to introduce yourself to the real fam. So as always, I like to ask the question, who is, Dr. Wilfredo Alvarez?
Well, again, thank you for having me on this show. I apologize, as I told you, I'm a bit under the weather here. So I'll do my
Yeah.
best to communicate as clearly as possible. So, where did you start, right? I am an immigrant from Dominican Republic, came to the United States when I was 17 years old. And for me, when I think about my personal journey, I of course have to think about this immigrant experience and what it's been like for me, but also the power of education. I was someone who
Mm.
never planned to go to school when I came to the US. And I tell this story in the book of my uncle basically forcing me to go and register for high school. And that moment, that event, represents a major turning point in my life, in my personal journey. So whenever I'm asked, tell me a little bit about yourself, of course, you don't want to talk about my deep, dark secrets and, etc. Oftentimes, I'm trying to be funny.
It would make for a great show, though.
That's a different show, though. That's a different show.
Yeah.
But yeah, yeah, trust me. Yeah, I could go there, but that's probably not the answer that you're looking for.
Yeah.
But I immediately think about my differences in relation to people who were born and raised in the U.S. for whom English is their
Mm,
native language. I had to learn this language as an adult. And I mean,
mm,
talking with a Spanish teacher yesterday, just yesterday, she tells me about the difficulty that many of her students have learning Spanish. I'm like, yeah, I understand. I had to learn English, as a young adult. And
mm.
then everything that comes with that, people's perception of you as someone who's from another country, as a foreigner, which
Yep.
is what I am. So, for me, to give you a glimpse into where I come from as a teacher, as a scholar, I have to start with, hey, I'm an immigrant who has had to navigate this society. And that sort of experience comes with great challenges that I try to articulate in some ways in the book. But yeah, native of Dominican Republic. I'm a college professor. I claim to be, I call myself an educator.
Mm.
I'm greatly influenced by many people, many mentors who believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. So I also study and teach about personal relationships and their significance. So just
Mm.
to give you a brief glimpse into the things where I come from, the things that motivate me to do my work.
That's awesome. No, that's great. Thank you so much for sharing. And yeah, I feel like, especially, as I've like gotten older, understand I'm originally from San Diego. I live in Southern California, and I grew up just a few minutes from the border. So like the immigrant experience, like I've been adjacent to it a good majority of my life, and like a lot of my friends immigrated from Mexico or like further down south, and so it's not new to me, and it's never been like this thing that really bothered me because a majority of my friends were from a different country or were first gen. As I got older and like started seeing all this rhetoric around immigration, and it's not new,
No,
but just for our generation, as far as like these things, and to see in more recent years it being taking a more, what's the word I'm thinking, like center stage approach since
research,
2015 ish, 2016.
yeah,
Yeah, like and came
immerse,
back hard with a vengeance.
yeah.
Yeah. So I'm curious for you, just to get into your book a little bit. I think the perspective that you go about from your book is looking at it at like educational institutions,
Yeah.
and then looking at the support staff or custodial staff in those, and like trying to hear their perspective a little bit. What led you up to that decision, or reason or perspective to write the book?
Thank you for that. Yeah, I and when introducing myself, I forgot this is relevant to the answer to your question. I forgot to mention that I migrated to New York City. So
Mm,
I
mm, mm.
went to high school in New York City. So I am from New York City in the U.S.
Okay.
That's also relevant to who I am as a person, because that's a place that really shaped my idea of what the U.S. is and isn't. And I'm one of those people that, due to the fact that geographically I'm from the East Coast, that I have the level of education that I have, I'm one of those people who have been called coastal elites, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of course, given what you just said about the last 5, 6 years, that has taken on a really interesting meaning in terms of the polarization that we have in this country.
Mm-hmm.
Your question is about my motivation to write the book, basically.
Yeah.
What are the main factors motivating me writing the book?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's the question.
So, given what I just told you about who I am, having to learn the language, migrating here from another country, basically, I wanted to understand what it's like for people uh, um, with not much. I'm trying to think how I want to phrase this. With people who do not have a lot of cultural capital. What I mean by that is
Mm-hmm.
the ability to speak the language, knowing and understanding US culture and society. I was interested in understanding the experiences of so called marginalized people. So, what I
Mm-hmm.
have learned in my experience is that you find a lot of humanity in those folks who are deemed as marginalized. So, as someone who became interested in studying issues of organizations and diversity, the idea came that, well, who are some of the folks, reading in graduate school, who are some of the folks deemed most marginalized in organizations? And I ran into this concept of dirty work. And when you consider what dirty work is in sociology, you look at garbage collectors, sex workers, housekeepers, cleaning staff, and people like janitors or custodians. Similar to your experiences in college, I remember going to the gym in grad school and always running into Latin American janitors and talking with them and just talking, And what I learned was
Yep.
that, wow, some of these people. Well, I thought a couple of things, and one of them, which I mentioned in the book, now in hindsight, was a bit problematic in terms of how
Mm-hmm.
I perceived them, and that was, these people must be miserable. I was like,
Mm.
well, why did I think that about them? Right.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
then that's been a long journey since then for me to unpack those thoughts. In talking with several of them, what I also learned is that those folks were really smart, witty, complex, just like you and me. But on the
Mm-hmm.
surface, once they put on the janitor uniform, they're cleaning our waste. They're immigrants. They do not speak English, many of them. So when you add all these layers on the surface, it leads to really complicated intercultural communication from many people, especially white middle class faculty and students and staff at the university that I studied. And
Mm-hmm.
so those were my motivations there. What is it like to occupy those spaces in organizations from the perspective? I became curious, and of course, part of this process is for me to understand my own journey as a member of this society in which I'm not part of the dominant group, I'm not part of the majority. I speak a language that's not the dominant language. I'm a working class person, right? I don't come from money or anything like that. So I wanted to
Mm-hmm.
understand what happens once all of those identities overlap: the linguistic one, occupational, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, etc. That's the impetus for the book.
Thank you so much for breaking that down and even going it, giving a little bit more context too, because it really helps. Because I think that's the biggest thing that fascinated me as one before I even started reading your book, but as I read it, just like the layers, it's so layered because like how not just in the U.S. like U.S. context of how we view immigration, but like as you outlined, it's just like the linguistic layer, the organizational hierarchical layer, because and then when these folks immigrated here, even some of the things you mentioned in your book, the professions that they had in their home countries, and then when they came here, kind of like that shifts, and then to even think. of like how we even perceive that role in and of itself of like dirty work. It just the layers to me, it was just like it like had my mind spinning and thinking, and even thinking back to my own academic experience, how you had even said I had those thoughts, and like even right now, as you said that, I was like confronting that to myself of like, wow, I actually truly believe that these folks like are trudging to work and doing this job. Like, I mean, if I was doing that job, I would really be miserable. But that is not, the case for everybody. Like sometimes it's just like a job, and you do it, it is, and like they're very happy and or whatever. The key phrase that I heard you say is like the humanity that is seen, like when you actually like have conversations and dig a little deeper. And to be honest, it really actually ain't even all that deep if you have a conversation with somebody, or at least initiate that. And I remember one thing that I heard after I had started working at my alma mater, after I was a student. And one of the folks that I always had a conversation with, his name was Alfredo, and I would always have a conversation with him. He was in my dorm for 2 years straight, and then I would see him around, and he said, like students think that we forget about them, like that we don't recognize them, that we don't know who they are. He said they forget about us, we don't forget about them. And that like really like messed me up. I'm like, dang, Alfredo, that's my bad. And it shows like what I see about that is like it doesn't. And maybe I'm thinking too deep into this, but maybe not. It's like we don't see the humanity in those folks,
Yeah.
that are doing the hard work, and whether that be because they're immigrants, custodial staff, or whatever. It's like there's a human element that is often forgot, and it's for me, it's convicting that like I played a role in that, but also eye opening to see that that's just the everyday experiences. And I'm curious. Yeah, I'm just rambling now, but yeah, that I was just like the biggest takeaways I was
think
reading the
you're
book.
hitting on a lot of really good thoughts here, good ideas. And as I'm listening to you, I'm like, well, I see now why you invited me to your podcast. It's right in your tagline, right?
Oh yeah.
For your
Oh
podcast.
yeah. Because we don't know what we miss until we miss them. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I that's the key, the one of the essence, I think, of this to me so far of this conversation, and connecting even to my challenges as an immigrant navigating society, and this book project. It's this idea of this is I wanted to because this is a point I wanted to make. When I was in graduate school, I remember one of my professors said to us, we do a lot of watching from a distance in this country, and that stayed with me. And I see it honestly at this point. It may just be how my brain is trained. This idea that we do just that. That we there is this sense of sort of detachment and disconnect that I have experienced as an immigrant, and I perceive that oftentimes it's because I am different. And that's regardless of whether the person is white or black or Latino, etc. Having to negotiate, I think it's the UP, having to negotiate,
Oh.
This space of being here, but having to watch others from a distance is something that's really, it's real to me. It's real to me. And I think oftentimes you find people, for example, in occupations like janitors, and for many people, they are there, but they're not there. That's this idea of invisibility that came up, this theme, as I was working on this project. And I try to explain in the book what I mean by invisibility. Clearly, it's metaphorical. It's not, literal.
Yeah.
There is a body in the room, right? But the ways in which they would the janitors would walk into someone's office and a greeting would not be reciprocated.
Yeah.
I went through that just this past week several times. I'm like, I find it fascinating how those dynamics play out in everyday life. But ultimately, you said the key word here, the concept of dehumanizing others. To be human, it's much more than being present in the room, right? To be
Yeah.
human is to engage with each other, period, but just to engage with each other in certain ways. And again,
Mm-hmm.
what I try to showcase in this book, which is a case study, is here's some of the ways in which these janitors told me that they perceive that others engage and do not engage with them, right? So for me, it's I come back to this theme of connection in everyday life and how we miss opportunities to connect with people. And I think there are real implications to that in terms of how we view ourselves in relation to others, and how we operate in the world, and those implications perhaps related to what's transpired in this country the last 5 6 years. Are we losing our humanity in this country? It seems to me like a
Mm.
lot of public figures, politicians, are just being cruel. I'm
Mm-hmm.
seeing cruelty, the way they talk
Yeah.
about people, the way. So, and then you have a lot of our friends and family members who support them.
Yeah.
Do they not see that, wow, what I'm seeing? But again, maybe I'm sensitized because of who I
Mm.
am. Again, being different, an immigrant, and having to navigate society as an immigrant, I'm very sensitized to these ideas. And for me, even a public greeting goes a long way. If I see you in the,
Absolutely.
in the hallway at work and I say hello, and you don't say hello back to me, and then I notice a pattern, my brain starts to go in certain directions, like, huh, I wonder how they perceive me.
Well, those are all great points. Oh my gosh. I want to stay on track, but I went to a conference this past week, and we had like these racial affinity groups. It was a conference about race and how do we keep this fight for equity going, and having conversations about that. And we had these racial affinity groups, and um, I was in, like, obviously the black group, because I'm black, African American / black, and so like one of the older folks in the group, what I really genuinely like appreciated about it was that it was like intergenerational. So it was
Mm,
like millennials, younger than millennials, like Gen Zs, and then you had the boomer generation, Gen X a little bit. And so this one woman who had lived in my city that I live in 30 plus years, her family came here in like the sixth, well, probably a little bit longer than that. Anyways, she she was talking about how she's lived in one neighborhood, one part of the city for a really long time, and it's historically a black neighborhood. And as the black folks got older or their kids took over the homes, either they sold them or they're renting them out and they live somewhere else, right?
yeah.
And so she had said that I'm still living in this neighborhood, and you have a whole bunch of like, what she had said, like white folks moving in or buying these homes, and they don't
Hmm.
talk to her. And you're coming into my neighborhood and you're not saying anything to me. And she's like, my family's from the South. You say something, it doesn't have to be, you say hello. You say, how you doing? Nice weather, something. Right. And she
Yeah.
says they don't talk to her. And she was like, I don't know if it's like a difference in culture thing or if it's really because I'm black. She had found her way, she would greet them. It wouldn't be reciprocated, and different things like that. And she was a dark skinned black woman too, which, um, means a little something. And so I even connect that to my own experiences of, I live in Southern California, Orange County. I lived in Orange County for 10 years. It's a very white place. In the area that I lived in, it had a little bit more money. I don't, but they
Hmm.
did. And so I just remember, like, when I would walk through the neighborhood, like nobody would say anything to me. I would say, "Hey, how you doing?" It would not be reciprocated. And so, like, you know, and I would witness it even at the institution that I worked at. I'm just like, it blows my mind, you know what I'm saying? And I don't know if you really are we're talking about like race in particular, or just the hierarchical like places
Yeah.
within organizations or the institution that you were looking at. But it blows my mind how like these simple ways of it really it does something for you and has you think, like, what does that person think of me that they could not even open up their mouth to say hello? And it doesn't take that. I mean, even going back to like a difference in language, like you could say hello, hi, or it's a very basic interaction,
Yep.
but it really does speak to like a bigger thing. I don't know, maybe I'm sensitized
I,
to it. Just
no,
you know what I'm saying? It's just like it's so simple, but like what are you doing, like what you are by like not even interacting in that simple, very simple
yeah.
way or not reciprocating it, like what that communicates on a larger scale. And it's just been exacerbated, like you said, over the last few years.
Hey, you read my mind.
Yeah.
Honestly, everything you said. Let me try to respond to what you just said because
No, please do.
it's so prescient to what I just experienced just this past semester.
Mm,
Because what you just said about it seems like such a small thing,
mm,
which is not really small, right? It's
yeah,
I
yeah.
would argue it's huge when it
Mm,
comes to our intercultural, interracial relations.
mm,
Jonathan, I just told a colleague, what is it with people around here where I live that even a public greeting seems to be a challenge?
mm,
So
mm.
here's what I'm experiencing right now. It could be a culture, but that's fine, right? People are who they
Yeah,
are. We're different.
yep.
But that the choice not to say hello or to look the other way, which is what I
Mm.
keep running into around here
Yeah.
where I live in central New York and even at work. Um, the choice of looking the other way sends a message.
Mm,
It's symbolic, as you said. It communicates something. So for that woman, that black woman that was at your conference, right? She's been in this neighborhood. All these white people move in, and now no one says hello to her. It goes beyond than just, well, this is how we are.
mm-hmm.
And here's what else about this conversation. Here's what else. All the white people listening, when it comes to, well, what can I do? What can I do when it comes to race relations? Say hello to people in public. How about we start there?
Yeah,
Especially if they are
yeah.
not white. Just say
Yeah.
hello. What do you think? I know. It sounds silly. Some people are gonna be like, well, that's not my thing, right? Especially if you're like in New York,
Mm-hmm.
forget it. But I think there is something poignant about this exchange in terms of the choices we make in everyday life to
Mm-hmm.
either reach out and connect or not. And again, I think it comes back to your program's tagline. I know
Mm,
my partner produced a documentary called In Passing, and it was exactly about this. But what do
mm.
you do? What choices do you make when passing by someone who's different from you? Because that's the thing. We perceive this surface level differences. And yes, of course, it could be challenging to reach out to someone, even to say hello for some.
Mhm.
But any person, any white person that I know today, if you ask me, well, what can I do? You're in communication. I would say, try to say hello to someone, especially if they are not white, and especially if they say hello to you in public. Just
Mhm.
reciprocate it. It'll send a message of, I see you. But not saying hello could send a very different message. And I think it goes a long way in how we perceive that other perceive us. You said you don't know if it's
Mm.
race or something else. Of course, I thought it was race.
Yeah,
Of
well, I did too. I just
I think a lot of people don't say hello because of who I am. What am I supposed to
Yeah.
think? Especially when it's a
Yep,
pattern.
yep.
You know what I mean? When it's a pattern, when it's a clear,
Yeah, if it's a pattern for sure.
what am I
Yep.
supposed to think? I mean, yeah,
Mhm. I think as you were talking to when like the message it sends is that you're not welcome.
yeah,
Especially if
yeah,
it's like in the neighborhood, if you are one of few, if you are on a I'm putting this in air quotes, lower rung in the hierarchical like society. It's like you're not welcome, like or
yeah,
you don't matter.
absolutely.
To not even like greet somebody. I was gaslighting myself earlier when I said it's not that big of a deal, but like it is a big deal. Like it's a big deal to me
Absolutely.
when somebody doesn't. Yeah, like when
That's
nobody
what the book
reciprocates
is.
that. Yeah.
No, yeah, that's what the book
Yes.
is about. The everyday choices that we make to try to connect with someone who on the surface, uh, historically is someone who has low symbolic value, right? A janitor,
Mm.
occupationally speaking, a low level of prestige, occupationally speaking. Do you choose to acknowledge their humanity or not? So in a way, that's at the essence of this book, and it's exactly what we're talking about.
Mm.
It's a book
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
mundane communication and the choices that we
Mm.
make to reach out and move beyond watching each other and
Mm.
seeking to connect and acknowledging each other's humanity.
I'm curious, like more of a direct question about your book because I haven't finished it yet, but I'm curious, was there any like points of connection that were made from like the participants in your study to like anybody in the institution, say like at a higher level that were like meaningful or substantive?
That's a good question. So I wanted to understand what it was like to live life as a janitor.
Mm-hmm.
I even worked as one briefly for several months, part time. But your question has to do with, if I understand it correctly, um, was there any feedback that was given to administrative staff and leadership, etc., from this experience?
No,
From
well, that's a good question, but I was asking like I'm curious if like the staff, like the janitorial staff or custodial staff, like
Yeah,
if they had any like meaningful connections throughout their time like working there with anybody outside of just colleagues or anybody. I'm curious if there was any like relationships that were built for somebody, any significant relationships that were built with folks in a VP role or like
yeah,
professors or anything like that. I'm curious if there was any other outcomes besides, these other ones. Because I'm just curious if there was anybody that went against the grain of what normally happened in those situations, that did say hello, that did engage in conversations. I'm
absolutely.
curious.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
good question. Based on my experience with these folks, I interviewed 25 people. You're always going to find outliers in any complex
Mm-hmm.
system made up of many people. So of course there were many people who greeted them and said hello and were friendly, etc. But the basic message I got from the large majority of this group of janitors, it's important to state that I'm not seeking to generalize in any way with my book and say this is what all janitors go through, right? I just
Mm-hmm.
wanted
Mm-hmm.
to study this organization and this group of people specifically. So basically, the message from many of them was that, in essence, the higher the title, the role, the more unpleasant the person behaved towards them.
Mm.
And that, some people may say, well, yeah, I'm not surprised, etc. But again, what story does this book tell? What story does it tell about the chasms, the distance among us as people? It's when it
Mm-hmm.
comes to our social roles, our labels, and what I do invite people who read the book is see if you can extrapolate any of these themes from this book to the larger society, right? There are
Mm.
many people who, and I thought about this, for example. We just had a Supreme Court confirmation process. The first Black woman was confirmed to be part of the Supreme Court. What if,
Yes. Yes.
and of course, many people are not happy with that, right? And then the question for me is, imagine if we were to affirm more Black little girls and how many more of them we should have had by now on the Supreme Court, not only on the Supreme Court, but the presidency, etc. But instead, what we
Mm.
choose to say is, they're not like us. They are deficient. They are this. They are that. So imagine if we did the opposite and affirmed them, right? And the president said it's time that we tap into our talents as a nation. And of course,
Mm-hmm.
President Biden, of course, he's correct. We are a diverse nation full of richness and talents when it comes to our human capital. But
Mm-hmm.
sometimes that gets suppressed because the person is not white or male. So think about
Mm-hmm.
that. Only one third of our population or so is white males, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there has been almost total dominance from that group towards the other groups in society. What if we were to elevate
Mm-hmm.
people? Imagine that. But when we get into ideologies of hate like white supremacy, they are fundamentally a zero sum game in their orientation,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you are winning, that means that I am losing. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that manifests in our interpersonal dynamics in organizations and elsewhere, right? When we talk about white supremacy, which I believe is probably the worst disease inflicted in modern humanity, this idea that some groups of people are fundamentally superior to others.
Mm-hmm.
Fundamentally at the core, they have a zero sum game orientation. If a non-white person is doing well, then that means that a white person is not doing well. And I think that's where we're running into problems today with this political polarization that exists. That if
Mm-hmm.
some people are taking these positions, like the vice presidency, then that means there is a white person who's doesn't have that position. And I think
Yeah.
unless we overcome ideologies of hate like white supremacy, it's going to be we're going to have some problems as a society.
Mm. Yeah. Hmm.
I know I gave you a lot. I'm sorry.
No, well, I'm trying to figure out which way to take it because like as you were talking too, I'm like, oh, I need to do an episode on white supremacy. But the other side of that is like you hit on something that was like so poignant. It is a zero sum game when we operate out of a place of scarcity. If I don't get this thing, then everybody else is gonna have it. So we hoard, we operate out of greed, we protect, we don't uplift other people and ultimately dehumanize the other because like anybody that's in my camp, anybody that I have an affinity towards or that is like me, we have to protect that. Which you're in, yeah, spot on and saying that it just is it just like white supremacy culture is just so it really it's so pervasive, right? That it's infiltrated every
It's who we are.
facet of our yeah
It's
it
who
is
we are.
and it regardless of color like it is like infiltrated. It's like an ideology. It's so pervasive everywhere, and so you have to like actively fight against it, actively go against the grain. And so
And it's not
it's
just
funny like how we could, yeah,
it's not just
say
enact,
again.
it's not just enacted by whites, by the way. Non
Yes, no, yeah, exactly.
those that
Non
support
yeah.
force the idea that they are inferior to whites. So it's also important to
Mm-hmm.
highlight that idea. I've heard the
Yep.
word tribalism a lot lately. Well, humans
Mm.
are tribalistic, etc. Yeah, I get that. As a
Yeah.
species, we are, but there are all of these sophisticated sociological mechanisms that have brought us here,
Yes.
right? At the end of the day,
Yep.
I'm a social scientist, and we have crafted a really fancy and sophisticated symbolic system, discursive system that we have created all these stories in which we've told ourselves this is who we are and
Mm-hmm.
this is who they are. And that's it. We have
All
internalized all
right,
these
y'all, real
stories,
quick, if you're
and
not
many of us are
familiar with
comfortable with
replacement
those
theory,
stories.
I want to break it
Yeah.
down.
And I
In
tell my
short,
white
it's this
students, my
harmful
students in
racist
my
conspiracy
intercultural
theory rooted in
communication
white
class,
supremacist ideology.
still in the
And at its
21st
core,
century,
it
based
pushes
on
the
all these
idea that white
stories
people
we've
are being
crafted,
systemically replaced by people
it's
of
good
color
to be
through
white in the
immigration, higher
US.
birth rates, or
It's
cultural
also
and
good to
political
be a
shifts.
man,
The theory frames
right? I'm talking about
demographic change
diversity
as a
now. It's
threat,
good to
not a
be
natural part of society evolving.
heterosexual,
And scholars have
It's
traced
good
it
to
back to early
be
20th century
middle class
nationalist
or
movements,
higher.
but it's been repackaged
It's
over
good
and over and over again
to
and
speak the dominant
amplified in
language
recent years,
fluently.
especially in
There are all
far-right media
these
and political
layers
rhetoric.
of
And it's not
advantages
just an
and
idea. It's
disadvantages
been
that
cited
humans
as
we just
motivation behind
have,
mass violence,
and they
like
are
the attacks
built
in
on all these
Charlottesville, El
fancy
Paso, and
stories,
Buffalo. But here's
discourse
the thing, y'all.
systems that
What
we
it
have
really
built, or
does is
communication
it
systems,
conflates discomfort
and
with
some of us
danger.
just
It tells white
internalize
folks
them
that
and
sharing space,
operate and
whether it be
just
physical or
without any
power, is the
critical
same thing as being
awareness of
erased.
what's
And it
happening.
stokes fear and
Especially if it
scarcity
benefits
instead of
the
inviting
person,
growth
the
or
individual.
solidarity. What we're
Yeah.
actually talking
Some of
about
us,
is equity.
it's
What
like
we're
we
actually
see it and I was
talking
like,
about is
oh, this is
access.
messed
We're
up,
actually
but
talking about is
oh
voice. What we're
it doesn't
actually
affect me in
talking
any
about
ways.
is
Well,
belonging,
Yeah.
but
not erasure. But if you've
and
always been centered,
until again, the
decentering can
value
feel
of
like a threat,
education, the
even when it's
significance of
just discomfort.
education, right?
All right, y'all.
Until
Back to the
we
conversation.
learn how to challenge ourselves, until we learn how to challenge other people in our spheres of influence, when it comes to all these issues of difference and diversity, we're going to continue to have a lot of these problems when it comes to intergroup conflict.
I'm reminded of like this idea, and it connects. But this, I did a trauma informed like care training, and we were asked the difference, like what is the difference between like being unsafe and just being uncomfortable? Because like if you're being uncomfortable, you have to be able to sit in that and understand like
Yeah.
that there is a way out, that there's a way to navigate this thing, that you're just uncomfortable. Like right now is a place that you're just like, it's almost like you got a lumpy cushion. You know what I'm saying? And unsafe is like you're actually in danger. And sometimes I feel like in this conversation when we're talking about like how the demographics of the US, I mean, they have been changed, but they're going to continue to change. And like there is just this like, for those who truly subscribe to like and wholeheartedly the replacement theory, that's exactly what I'm hitting at.
Yeah.
Like this idea from the replacement theory has instilled this idea that like white folks are going to be replaced, which instills like this fear of being unsafe, right? That like once other folks are in power, that they're going to replace you, they're going to oppress you, like you're going to have no place in society whatsoever, right? And it's instilling like this unsafe, like insecurity and scarcity mindset, and it really capitalizes on fear. But what is actually this idea, and I've seen it play out in like microcosms where a white person gets in spaces where they're the only because they're not used to it.
Yeah.
It's actually uncomfortable, but it feels like they're unsafe, but it's actually uncomfortable. And like they don't even realize that you're just uncomfortable and that like no harm is going to come to you, that everything's going to be all right. You're just not used to this. I see it on a grand scale of the harm, and getting to your point of like the harm that can do. Like when you really like, we have seen it, right, with the shootings that have taken place that are particularly targeting people, with the rise in anti-Asian hate that has always been there, but we've seen it increase in the last three years, with this incredible like visceral response to immigrants, whether it been the Haitian immigrants, whether it been along the Texas border as well. There's just this visceral response, and it's all rooted in this fear and dehumanizing of other people that is not somehow purposely / has always been in these stories of who American is supposed to be, who is supposed to have a place in the U.S. I think you're speaking to something, and really like outlining it really, really well. So no, I appreciate that. I just like, that was just the immediate thought that came to mind. Because that's so recent. I'm just like, man, like it's just so much there.
Yeah, no, I mean, these conversations, as you know, are yeah, but obviously both of us believe that they are necessary. But what you're describing there at the interpersonal and the group level is a power shift. I've asked my students a similar question in terms of, well, you're white and you walk into a room of people and everyone's black. How do you feel? And most students say, yeah, probably uncomfortable. But the concept that you're highlighting there is that of a power shift, right? And again, when you've benefited from the advantages of society as it is constructed, right? So imagine if you're heterosexual and all of a sudden holding hands in public with let's say you're a man, you're holding hands with your wife, who's a woman, then you begin to see a pattern shifting towards people calling you names, perhaps even engaging in acts of physical violence.
Mm-hmm.
Heterosexual people, stop holding hands in public. That's weird,
Mm-hmm.
right? So imagine that type of shift. I'm thinking in my own case as someone who identifies as heterosexual, that would be hard for me to process. So
Mm-hmm.
you have a society in which white European Americans have been the numerical majority and they've lived among each other the greater part of the last century. And all of a sudden you begin to see more people like you in public, more people like
Mm-hmm.
me in public, in films, TV commercials. There's all these interracial couples now. I don't know if you've noticed in
Oh, I've noticed.
television commercials. And it's
Yep.
interesting to see the races that are represented and the couplings, right?
Mm-hmm.
You rarely see a black woman and a white man. It's almost always a white woman and a black man. Or did I mean
Mm-hmm.
to say the opposite? Anyways, it's interesting. Pay
Yeah.
attention to
It's
that.
very interesting. Yeah. Very
Um,
interesting. Yeah.
so I think what we're seeing right now, number one, I think a lot of people should be very concerned about just the public acts of violence that we're
Mm-hmm.
seeing. It's symbolic violence, rhetorical violence, not just physical violence. I believe, rhetorical violence could actually go much, much further. That if that continues, and I'm troubled by many of our mass media outlets and all this the hate that they're spewing. So,
Mm-hmm.
but that is essentially what this country is going through right now. It is the renegotiation of the idea of unchallenged white male dominance.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's happening right now. Unchallenged white male dominance is getting decentered, right? And then we're
Yep.
in the midst of that process sociologically. Now we're having to say, well, we all live here. How could we coexist? And I just watched a news report from Vice News, which I really like. And
Mm-hmm.
this was about Hungary being a conservative utopia, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the message in that report was that there were many U.S. American conservatives at this conference, and basically the message from that report is we have some values and they're non-negotiable. We're not going to change our values. The reporter asked this particular person at the conference, well, what about diversity and inclusion and the fact that the US is such a diverse society? And he said, and the guy at the end of the news report says, we have these values, and I'm paraphrasing, and they're basically non
Mm-hmm.
negotiable. And that's how many people see their place in US society. This is a white nation, this is a Christian nation, this is a heterosexual nation. And some of these ideas are non negotiable. I think that's what we're seeing through our politics today. The point is, however, blacks are not going anywhere, Latinos are not going anywhere, gays and
Mm-hmm.
lesbians are not going, transgender, people who are a-religious are not going, right? So where
Yeah.
do we go from here?
Mm-hmm. And to even bring it full circle, like if you're like overwhelmed and feeling like I don't know what to do with all the things that we talked about, it's like
You
you can greet somebody, you can humanize them and just say
can
hello.
say hello to someone who looks like me in public if you're white, please.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even a smile will go
Yeah.
along.
It goes a long way. Yeah. Just like those simple human interactions. Dr. Alvarez, I've kept you long enough. Thank you so much. I know what's interesting is that we talked about your book, took some aspects out of it, but all of this relates, right? It gets to the heart of what you're saying in your book and communicating in your book of humanizing folks, the overlapping social identities that kind of occur within society and how we view people. Your book like really highlights a particular group, but it's a microcosm that really highlights what's going on particularly in the U.S. context right now. It's just really wild. And to be quite honest, if anybody's paying attention to like global news, this idea of some form of replacement theory, some form of immigration hate, all these different things, like it is a very pervasive thing that's happening.
Yeah.
It's happening all over the world. Thank you so much for bringing everything that you brought today, sharing your wisdom, your knowledge. I would love for folks to tap into what you're doing and also be able to get your book. I'm gonna make sure to plug all that, but would love for you to share where folks can get connected with you and purchase and read your book.
Yes, I'm on Twitter. I posted the book, and my Twitter handle is my last name Alvarez and my first name Wilfredo. There's a link there. I'm on Instagram. My last name Alvarez W and the number 12 1 2. I'm on LinkedIn. My first name Wilfredo, last name Alvarez, comma PhD, and I'm on Facebook. Also, just search by my first and last name, and that should come up. I've posted links of the book. People could also go to the Ohio State University Press website directly, but the book is also on Amazon and Barnes and Noble. So if you just Google my name, Everyday Dirty Work, or just Google my name, the link will show up. One of the first links is one for the book, for the publisher, Ohio State University Press.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much again for coming on. I will be sure to drop all those links and where to get in contact with you as well as your book in the show notes so folks can cop that. But really, really appreciate you and your time today.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure talking with you.